So, I kind of want to get this done today because I'm only going to be recording one. And I'm eating chowder while recording, which is really weird. It smells like cat food, and I don't know why it smells like cat food. Guys, should it smell like cat food? I don't know if it should smell like cat food, but it smells like cat food. I have my tea that is more milk than fucking water because we had like barely any milk left, so I just dumped it all and then chugged the rest of it like a madman. I don't have any friends this time. As fun as it is to have them, I want to get this done kind of fast today. Uh, because I'm actually going to be writing later today, so I may be streaming that. I saw that the 2 cycle series won with the one shots every now and then. So I've got to prepare what series I'm going to do. Also, I know which series I want to do next, but I think it has even heftier chapters than this. And I'm struggling to finish these chapters. In the sense of, if I record one of these chapters and I try to record another, I strain my voice. Yesterday when I recorded 3 things, I think, right? I could be so fucking wrong. I could be so fucking wrong there. I I was feeling pain, and most of the day afterwards, I literally was just No, I only record 2 things. Most of the day afterwards, I was just reading stuff, trying to find things. So I found some short one shots. So I'm probably gonna read 1 chapter of either or fic, and then swap. So tomorrow will be a one shot that has blanket permission. I found this another author that does blanket permissions because I found a Podficker that used Podfic's blanket permission ones, and I was like, oh, I've never seen this author. So I started poking around their shit, and I love their shit already. So, that's fun. I'm trying to get them into the Podficker Discord. It has been not working. I did fix up the order of the playlist. I didn't realize how botched it was until I went to go look at it to make sure I ordered shit correctly. No, you can hear my own voice. So that is fixed and in order, with the alternate path being first, then Borrowed a Cat's Paws starting. Now I do have a little problem. Um, I think the thing is going to go over 8 hours. CapCut has a problem when recordings go over 8 hours. It kind of starts being funny about it. And I may actually have to get some external drives because I have a lot of storage, but if I'm saving 8-hour plus videos down and keeping the recordings to maybe post some other shit, that's gonna kill my storage eventually. So, I don't know. I will try to turn I Borrowed a Cat's Paws into a full one, kind of like I did with the other one. But I'm not gonna make promises about that. Anyway, other than that, I think that's all I have to say. Check my posts for new information if I have some. And that's really all I have to say today. Let's get on to the fic. This is Chapter 8 of I Borrowed a Cat's Paws by CrouchingTiger28. Do you do this every night? Should have demanded from his position under Shigaraki's recliner. Dobby perched on the couch like a nervous pigeon with a cup of ice and a loose handful of mints didn't even acknowledge him. No wonder your temper's so bad, Shota grumbled, his tail lashing on the dusty floor. If you need to get out of bed every night and to eat a cup of ice like a feral raccoon, you must be hanging onto your quirk meltdown by a thread. Dobby popped another mint into his mouth and relaxed slightly into the couch cushions. An already smoldering thread. Should have groaned despairingly. Should have sighed, resting his head on his forearm. He'd gotten to sleep earlier that day, hoping to make up for lost time last night. It had proven completely useless. Since after only a few minutes of wrestling with the door, Dobby had appeared like a spirit with unfinished business to raid the freezer once again, which left Shota lying under Shigaraki's recliner, unable to fall asleep, but also unable to do literally anything useful and reduced to trying very hard not to think about what the dust in the League of Villains hideout had once been. He had been pretty sure there was a decent amount of ash mixed in there too. And if Shota groomed himself like an actual cat, he'd be worried about eating too much ash and poisoning himself or something. The living room door creaked softly. It should have resisted the urge to wail in despair as Spinner's reptilian head poked through. Hey, Dabby, Spinner whispered, slipping into the living room and closing the door silently behind him. Dabby grunted at him, more focused on quietly breaking apart the ice that fused together in his cup. Spinner padded to the couch with only faint scritching noise of claws on hardwood, settling down right next to Dobby. A dangerous move, but Shota admired his courage. You cold again? Dobby grumbled, grinding a mouthful of ice and mints. Cold and wired. Spinner sighed, tipping his head back to rest on the back of the couch. For a moment, all Shota could see was his students. Asti sitting on the couch in the dorms with Todoroki on her right side, and Shoji on her left. Kirishima chewing on ice with his spiky, pointed teeth. Now, there was a kid with an iron deficiency. The sheer amount of iron needed to sustain his quirk was off the charts. Shota didn't envy Vlad for Tetsu either. He suspected that actually being made of metal would only make that so much worse. Sleep is for the weak, Dobby grunted, sounding so like Todoroki's deadpan delivery that Shota had to do a double take. I want to sleep for a week, Spinner returned, exactly like Uraraka had when Todoroki had tried that line on her. Should have growled at himself, vigorously shaking his head. He needed to stop projecting his students onto these villains. He knew villains were people. He used that information to psychoanalyze them time and time again. Because people, as it turned out, always acted like people. Shota himself had walked a fine edge between villainy and heroism before he decided his path in life and gone on to win the sports festival. But people are not. They were still villains. What Shota got out of this situation, he'd go back to fight 'em. And for all he knew, they were already planning on attacking his students again. Shota couldn't afford to have sympathy for them. You want a mint? Dobby offered, offering Spinner the two mints still in his hand. Peppermint or spearmint? Dobby shrugged lazily, one of the mints almost falling out of his hand with the motion. Spinner sighed and snatched one, unwrapping the mint with short, tired motions. Dobby idly crunched his ice and stunk his last mint. Shota perked his ears up, eager for Dobby to finish his midnight snack and leave the room already. Maybe he'd take Spinner with him. Maybe Shota would finally be left alone long enough to get out. He'd make it to UA with no trouble, and then the whole frustrating scenario would be over. While he was daydreaming, maybe Kuragiri would reveal that he'd been an undercover agent this whole time, and he had discovered a way to heal All Might's crippling injury. Shun knew thinking like that was illogical. He couldn't wait for the quetzal opportunity to get out. He had to make his own. He didn't dare provoke Dobby too much, especially without anyone to hide behind. Fortunately, Dobby was going to leave on his own. Shota had experience doing stakeouts, sitting in one place for hours in hopes of something even mildly interesting might happen. When he wanted to, he could be patient. It took far less than an hour for Dobby to crunch his last bits of ice, drink the ice melt in his cup, and slip out of the room again, which left Spinner alone on the couch, staring blankly at the ceiling. Shota slipped out from under the recliner, shaking as much dust as he could out of his fur. His footsteps were completely silent, and Spinner didn't even see him coming. Spinner was wearing loose sweatpants and nothing else, his feet bare. He had long, triangular claws on each toe. Though they looked somewhat overgrown to Shota, not that he particularly cared. He was starting to like having claws himself. And they were just so versatile, like tiny built-in knives into his hands. He could stab anything he wanted at the drop of a hat. Spinner slapped the hand over his mouth to muffle a startled yelp, practically jumping out of his scales. Soto retracted his claws and continued to sit on the floor, staring balefully at Spinner. What? Spinner gaped. What do you want? Should have lifted his paw and deliberately unsheathed his claws. Spinner cursed, scrambling away. Should have bared his teeth, hissing furiously. And Spinner sprang off the couch, hurriedly backing away. It took only a few threatening lunges and territorial growls to send Spinner out of the living room with his tail between his legs. A full-grown man, renowned villain in fact, scared off by a house cat. Should have pushed the living room door closed with one paw before turning his attention to the front door again. He was much better at timing his jumps now, mostly getting to the right height. The harder part was grabbing the door handle properly. He needed to have his right paw over the post of the door handle, and his left hooked around the latch itself, and then use both of his back paws. He had to be on the wall, not the door. It was honestly a miracle he'd managed it the first time. After what felt like hours, but was only about 10 minutes, the door reluctantly cracked open. Joe dropped to the floor with a relieved huff. He grabbed the door with one paw and dragged it open a few more centimeters, then slipped through the gap. Once again, the street side door was locked. Shota made it up onto the shoe shelf in one smooth jump, then hunched on the very ledge to paw at the door handle. The lock was obviously old, the metal dull and worn with rust creeping from the latch. It proved incredibly stubborn when Shota tried to turn it, sticking in place with rusted metal grinding on rusted metal. He had to reach as far as he could possibly extend to touch the lock, and he had practically no leverage to speak of. And after 20 minutes of just wrestling with the lock, Shota's arms ached something fierce. Shota settled back onto his haunches with a huff. Resting his strained muscles, he eyed the lock and door handle, trying to come up with anything that could be more effective than what he was already doing. This door had a thumb latch with alternating rectangle handle and a bulky backplate. The latch itself would be child's play to open, even if it was twice as rusted as the lock. All it required was downward force. And Shota just needed gravity for that. Unfortunately, he could only do that after he got the lock open. The rectangular handle part might be useful, though. If Shota could stand on the bottom of the handle, he might have the leverage required to open the lock. Just as he was gauging the distance to jump, the cracked open door to the living room flew all the way open. Shota whirled towards the door so fast that he almost fell off the shelf, his fur poofing out and the spine arching automatically. The moonlight from the window cast on Dabby's scar into cold relief. Shota's cat eyes, built for detecting motion, caught every flicker of his gaze, from Shota to the door handle and back to Shota again. Are you trying to get out? Dobby asked, and there was the sharply cruel villain that had mocked Shota at the training camp. Shota's heart rate tripled, but he wasn't an amateur. There was still a chance to salvage this. With monumental effort, Shota flattened down his hackles, straightened his spine, and forced his ears up, as though he had nothing in the world to be concerned about. He sat down and theatrically began licking his paw. You're not cute, Dobby hissed, and blue sparks popped over his skin. Shota's ears flattened to his skull for a split second before he forced them up again, sweeping his tail in deliberately slow arcs. He tilted his head at Dobby, flicking his ear slightly. I have no idea how I got here either, Shota said with his eyes. Now, Shota was not an actor. He was a pro hero, but he was a pro hero who intentionally cultivated an easy to underestimate physical appearance. And since the only memorable thing about him was his quirk and his capture weapon, he'd done his fair share of undercover missions. Shota could fake loyalty. He could fake surprise, obedience, and various types of hatred. He could even fake interest when he wanted to. Honestly, the one thing Shota couldn't fake was joy. That was more Hazashi's territory, but he could certainly do innocence. I don't believe that innocent face for a second, Dobby snarled, taking a threatening step into the mudroom, reaching a hand forward in what was apparently a sign for, I'm about to set you on fire. The whole room got noticeably warmer. And Shota didn't react, just tilted his head at Dobby and widened his eyes even more, twitching his ears curiously. Somewhere, the deep cat instinct part of his brain said, ah, yes. I can work with this. A dozen tiny muscle adjustments flowed through Shota's body, and he found himself leaning towards Dobby with a happy chirp, pressing his face into Dobby's extended hand. All the wind was immediately snatched from Dobby's sails, and he visibly faltered. The hand on Shota's head shifted, and Shota's breath hitched for a split second. He forced his lungs to work, his trained eyes on Dobby's torso. The instant Dobby summoned even a spark, Shota could erase his quirk. Dobby's fingers curled around Shota's head, and two hot fingertips rubbed between his ears. Dobby, Shota noted vaguely, did not know how to pet cats. How could you not know how to pet cats? Shota's heart was still racing, his human brain screaming at him, but he pushed past the hero instincts. That would only get him killed. Leaned heavily on the cat instincts. Dobby had a look of faint shock on his face as he rubbed gingerly between his ears, and Shota latched his hero brain onto that while letting the cat control his body. Analyze and theorize. Stop panicking and think. Dobby had no idea how to pet a cat. He was shocked by something about the situation. Should a diliging to allow someone to touch him, possibly. Touching any cat at all, also a possibility, considering how bad he at it was. The surprise of Shota leading towards him had snapped him out of whatever rage he'd been building himself into. Another sign of an elemental quirk pre-meltdown. A good startle would often break somebody out of an emotional spiral. Once he'd taken all he could possibly manage, Shota slipped away from Dobby's touch, flowing down from the shoe shelf and onto the living room floor like a furry liquid. Dobby followed him, and Shota glanced back just in time to see the villain pull a key out of the door lock. Well, there went Shota's most promising escape route. Dang. Why'd you bring it back? Shota was sure that if Spitter had human skin instead of gecko scales, he would have gone pale upon seeing Shota slip into the room. Dobby blinked, looking down at Shota again. He's soft. From the look on his face, even Spitter could tell that there was something deeper than that. Shota used the hesitation to retreat under Shigaraki's recliner again. Dealing with the extra dust under the recliner was worth ensuring Dobby's increased hesitation and torching Shigaraki's special seat. He let you touch him? Shota demanded, not Shota, Spinner demanded for more than 3 seconds, and he didn't claw your face off? Dobby opened his mouth, then closed it. He did. He said after a long pause. And I didn't set him on fire. Smart cat, Spinner muttered. He played me, Dobby seethed, working himself back up into a proper rage. Like the cheap kazoo you are, Shota mumbled, and immediately smacked a paw over his mouth. He needed to stop listening to his students. If it was just Hazaji, Shota could mostly ignore it. But with meme culture coming from both sides, even he wasn't immune. Maybe he should spell Ashido? No, then he would also have to spell Kaminari. He would spell Kaminari, and Shitsu would never forgive him. We already knew he was too smart to be an ordinary cat, Spitter said cautiously. He was watching Dobby carefully from the corner of his eye, but was apparently smart enough to know better than to tell the fire villain directly that he needed to calm down. That was an instinct Shota would have pounded into little Tenya's head, would have liked to have pounded into little Tenya's head a bit more back when he, Tensei, and Hazashi had gotten together to babysit. Honestly, it was an instinct that a lot of the kids in his class could do better. And actually, most people in the world. Despite his mounting fury, Dabi was still coherent enough to know that torching Shigaraki's recliner was a bad idea. Shota was going to stay underneath it and not emerge until he was sure it was safe. It was a long and boring wait. Shota settled into a fitful half doze, somewhere between sleeping and meditating. He was too stressed to sleep properly, especially since it was the exact time he was usually on patrol. But meditating was usually what he did when he couldn't sleep, and it was better than nothing. Dabi left again after only a few minutes, but it took Spinner almost 2 hours to give up on his muted video game and retreat back through the living room door. Hopefully, he was going to sleep. That left Shota alone and awake in the middle of the night again, though this time with the door locked via a key he didn't even have. With nothing better to do, Shota dragged himself out from under the couch and dove through into a thorough casting of the room. By now, he was mostly used to the gray-washed feline vision, so he wasn't really surprised how easily it was to navigate even in the pitch-black room. Shota had been trained in criminal psychology and some forensics, and he'd done a decent amount of detective work in his time as an underground hero. He knew how to search a room, even as a cat. Every nook and cranny was inspected. It was much easier to get under shelves and into tiny crevices as a cat, though harder to test various places for hidden compartments. He managed to pull up the couch cushions, open every cupboard and drawer, and even pry the fridge open. Shota doubted any normal cat could have opened the fridge, even a quirked one. He only managed because he knew how fridge seals worked, and used that to his advantage. In total, Shota didn't find anything surprising. There was a loose baseboard in the corner between the TV and love seat, though, based on the empty, dusty crevice behind it, Shota suspected nobody had used it as a stash yet. The back of one of the cupboards was completely consumed by a huge bulk bag of individually wrapped mints, almost halfway gone. The cupboards and drawers Shota managed to get into were clean and ordinary, everything neatly sorted. The heavy-duty door in the kitchen was locked, which he only learned after several minutes and a dozen attempts to open it. The only thing he found on the couches were two discarded pens and a comb with more broken teeth than holes. The notes and lists he found were almost all in the same handwriting, a bouncy round lettering that Shota might almost call kawaii. Shockingly cutesy for someone for for who Shota suspected was Kurogiri. Since it was mostly shopping lists and sticky note reminders for various things. And Kurogiri seemed more like the type for that. There were a few others mixed in. Should have found half a note written in almost scarily perfect calligraphy that had fallen behind the trash can, a folded paper that just said password, and a list of seemingly random characters, and an almost unintelligible request for more of these on a pink sticky note that must have fallen off whatever they wanted more of. What was more noteworthy than what he found is what he didn't find. Shota loved junk drawers. They always provided a wonderful insight into the mind of the person cultivating them. One of his favorite investigating memories was when he opened a suspect's junk drawer and found half-empty magazine of bullets for the same make and model of gun that had killed their victim. But the League of Villains hideout didn't have a junk drawer. Even the most neat freak family had a junk drawer, more or less organized with different objects in it, but everywhere that was lived in for long enough developed a junk drawer as a necessary dumping grounds for things that otherwise didn't have a place. The hideout not having one meant that they only moved here recently. Should it had assumed the League had taken Bakugo to a dummy base or safe house, something they could burn without consequences. They still could have done that and simply moved bases a lot regardless of such upsets. That was what Shota would do if he was the one of the most wanted villain groups in this country. But they didn't live like people who are always moving. The combination of warp gate and compress would make moving easier, but then Kurogiri's counter of alcohols would be insanely tedious luxury to keep through frequent moves. Another on the list of things Shota hadn't found was any sort of blood supply. Not in the fridge, not in the freezer. Shota wouldn't say he was an expert on blood-based quirks, but he had taken quirk theory class. Went to school and then worked with Kai, and 3 years ago he had a student in his class with a quirk powered by blood consumption. So he wasn't ignorant. Blood-related quirks, even ones that didn't rely directly on blood consumption, required a lot of iron and sometimes other nutrients that were most often found in blood. A lot of people with blood consumption quirks required some amount of blood intake even beyond using their quirk. Jonah knew that Kai had helped to find and fund a food bank style charity that collected, packaged, and distributed various choices of synthetic, animal, and some human blood, specifically for people with blood based quirks. Shota hadn't found any. Not the glorified juice boxes designed to store in the fridge alongside other, less biohazardous foodstuffs. No frozen concentrate made to be mixed in large batches. Not even any of the half a dozen powdered synthetic blood substitute. And considering the intricacies of Toga's quirk, reading DNA from the blood she consumed, he doubted a synthetic would even be enough for her. Best case scenario, Toga had her own personal mini fridge of blood in her room. Worst case, she was chronically quirk starved. Considering how generally manic she was, and how obsessed with blood as a concept, Shota was unfortunately leaning towards the latter. Surely, surely, in a group of 8 of the most infamous villains in the country, at least one of them had a good handle on their quirk requirements. Right? Spinner's insomnia, which was most likely caused by his quirk making him partially nocturnal, Dobby's constant pre-meltdown, Toga's blood deficiency, Twice's obvious multiple personality disorder, the less obvious imposter syndrome, and even Shigaraki's dehydration. Undoubtedly a quirk drawback. Though exactly how, Shota wasn't sure. All pointed towards the answer being not likely. Shota was going to tentatively pin his hopes on Kurogiri and Mr. Compress. They seemed like the most sensible, responsible members of the group, and certainly more put together and better at regulating their own emotions than everyone else. He might have extended the same courtesy to Magne, but he was about 70% sure that her quirk did something to mess with her eyes, and all she was doing about it was wearing tinted sunglasses. In his last lap of the room, setting everything he'd moved or disturbed back to rights, Shota stopped briefly by one of the drawers under Kurogiri's alcohol collection. There was a magnetic knife block stuck to the side of the fridge, but there was also a smaller collection of kitchen knives in the drawer. Shota suspected they were for bartending as opposed to cooking. He managed to pull the chef's knife out of the drawer with its teeth and did a rough and ready quality test with the capabilities he had at hand. The blade was very sharp. It seemingly like high quality steel, and as far as Shota could tell, it had a full tang all the way through the handle. The handle itself was also surprisingly sturdy, from what he could tell as a cat. It would probably be decent for knife fighting, as decent as any kitchen knife got. That was, Shota carried the knife to the corridor with the loose baseboard, where he carefully stashed it and pushed the baseboard back in place. Probably nothing would come of it. In an immediate combat situation, Shota would rather go for the more accessible magnetic knife block, or be forced to fight barehanded. It was good to keep his options open, though. A, a decent knife was always a good thing to have. And that's the end. Also, I have a junk drawer too. I would know. Junk drawers appear everywhere. Okay? Like, you should check your house and try to find your junk drawer. They're very interesting. Our junk drawer is a mix of crafting supplies, tape, random clips I keep finding around the house, and probably a few hair combs and a bunch of other shit. So, yeah, they're kind of just a mixed bag of shit. But I'm gonna do Pika story time myself, because I do want to tell this story. So, when I was little, I invited some of my classmates to a birthday party I had at a bowling arena. Now, this wasn't hidden or anything. Like, it wasn't like a hidden birthday party or anything like that, but it was invite based. Okay? Somehow, this kid I've only talked to a few times had snuck into my birthday party. He got me a gift, too. But, like, I was very surprised to see him there because I damn knew I didn't invite him. But, yeah, he was a nice kid, so I didn't really mind that much. Out of anyone to sneak into a birthday party, at least he was not a jerkwad about it, you know? He just had fun with everyone else. It was a good birthday though. I don't even remember what birthday it was. I know I was younger though. He also was a kid that jumped over a fence and either there's three possible situations. Either A, he ran home, B, he jumped into the lake thing that I'm pretty sure had alligators in it, so I damn hope he didn't, but I didn't see him again, so I don't know. Or he got caught for jumping the fence of school and running. You know what's funny? He wasn't the only kid that had a track record for trying to jump the fence and running. Um, this girl I used to know. You know what's funny? I met this girl again, but I'm gonna use her as story time another time. Her sister, younger sister, had a habit of trying to jump the fence. Also, I watched once the fucking golf cart come around and book it at her. Like he fucking drove, jumped out of the thing, ran for this kid as she's trying to climb the fence, and grabbed her and just brought her back. It was the funniest shit ever. Listen, watching a kid get basically the equivalent of scruffed by an adult in real life was absolutely glorious. Okay? But anyway, like I said, this is the only video for today. I would record another, but I don't want to kill my voice if I do stream. So, bye for now!